I want to say up front that I'm really excited to be the chair, and I think this will be an event. But first of all, important rules. The format of the seminar is very simple. We have three key guests. The first one will be the keynote speaker, Professor Arthur Mutambara, who is the director and heading the Institute for the Future of Knowledge at the University of Johannesburg. The second is part of the two discussants. It will be Professor Chakanetsa Mavhunga, Professor of Science, Technology, and Society at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or known as MIT. The second discussant is Professor David Monyae, who is the director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, where I am also a non-resident senior research fellow. On that note, you all know the title of this seminar. Very briefly, it is the impacts of artificial intelligence on geopolitics. Beside the tariffs of the US president today, there is no other more important subject, I must say. On that note, I won't tell you much because I think our esteemed speaker and discussants will add a lot more than I could add. And so I'll ask Professor Mutambara to join us and deliver his presentation. And after that, I'll be opening up for the two discussants. First, Professor Mavhunga, and then second will be Professor Monyae. Professor Mutambara, please join us.
Thank you very much, Kofi. Let me just say that it's important that we start talking about AI and the Global South. The impact of AI in geopolitics and also where the Africans come into play. Right, our discussion today is the impact of AI on geopolitics. And I must emphasize that it's a two-way relationship. AI affects geopolitics and geopolitics affects AI. So as we discuss today, we must always remember it's a two-way street. The AI revolution affects geopolitics, and geopolitics does affect AI. Why do we care? AI is a transformative technology which is reshaping global power. Whatever we define as global power is affected by artificial intelligence. And geopolitics is about the interplay between geography, power, and politics. And AI has a role of amplifying capabilities and also amplifying competition between nations. In particular, AI is affecting military power, military operations, and military competition. It's affecting economic power and economic competition. AI is affecting diplomatic relations. What do we mean by geopolitics? Let's get our frames very clear. Geopolitics is the study of how geography, power, and politics interact to shape international relations and influence global events. So as we discuss the impact of AI on geopolitics, let us be very clear about the meaning. It is the study of how geography, power, and politics interact to shape international relations and influence global events. That's what we're discussing today. What is the impact of AI in geopolitics? Artificial intelligence, what is this animal called AI? It is the development and deployment of computer systems or machines that can perform tasks requiring human-like intelligence. Intelligence like yours, Mr. Madam human being, like learning, problem solving, and decision making. If we can get in a machine, in a computer system, learning capacity, problem-solving capabilities, and decision-making capacity. That is AI. It can be just a computer system like ChatGPT, or it can be a robot, a physical entity. The development and deployment of computer systems or machines that can perform tasks requiring human-like intelligence, such as learning, problem-solving, and decision-making. That is what we mean by AI. What is the taxonomy of this field? What are the different versions and expressions of AI? We have single task AI. In this one, the AI system is given a goal, a task to accomplish. And it does that. That's all it does. Goal-oriented, task-oriented. That's what we call single task AI. Then we have what's called agentic AI, where the machine, the system has agency. It has agency to make decisions, agency to complete a task. So that's what we call agentic AI. That's the second type of AI. Then we have generative AI. This is where the AI system creates new knowledge, new information, new pictures, new videos, new sounds. This is why we are talking about ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok 3, DeepSeek R1. This is a type of AI which is about creating new knowledge, new information, new data. And it took off around 2023, and you are all familiar with ChatGPT, Gemini, and the Chinese contribution, which is DeepSeek R1. That is your generative AI. Then artificial general intelligence. Now we're saying we don't want just a task. We want multiple intelligences in a machine. Just like you can walk, you can talk, you can play soccer. You have multiple abilities in the same person. What we seek to do under AGI is having an artificial intelligence system that has multiple capabilities in the same machine. That's harder. AGI is harder. AGI is work in progress, not yet achieved. We want multiple capabilities, multiple intelligence in the same machine. That's work in progress. The most exciting one is called superintelligence. Now, we are talking about building an intelligence system that is smarter than the smartest human being, smarter than Elon Musk, smarter than Einstein, smarter than Newton. Don't be arrogant, human beings. What makes you think that the AI will end with you? We start from a mouse, we go to an app, we go to average Joe and Jane, we go to Einstein, we go beyond. It's exponential. Superintelligence is about getting an AI system that is smarter than the smartest human being. And by the way, once you get one, you get a million. Replication in AI is very easy. If you get one super intelligent agent, you can get a million, you can get a billion. Now, what will happen to the world when we have a million machines smarter than the smartest human being? How can you control that? I mean, I know you control a cat at home because you are smarter than the cat. I know you have a dog at home and you look after it because you are smarter than it. How can you look after something that's smarter than you? You can't. These are the fears that what will happen when we have superintelligence. Not yet achieved, work in progress. Now, quantum computing is not a type of AI. It is an enabler. It's a new way of doing computing. Not yet done, but once we get quantum computing, classical computers are about ones and zeros. In quantum computing, you can have 0 and 1 at the same time. This is 10,000 times faster than the current computers. When quantum computing happens, you're going to change all your phones. You're going to change everything. Okay? So it's very important that you understand the importance of this taxonomy of AI systems. And quantum computing, when it gets on board, combined with AI, it's a major revolution. Okay? Now that we have a sense of geopolitics, a sense of AI, we are saying what's going on in terms of the impact. The major players, US, China, Russia, they're all leading AI development. Billions of dollars are being plowed into research. What are they trying to do? Achieve technological and strategic dominance by using AI. We now have an AI-driven arms race. This is what's happening in terms of geopolitics. AI is amplifying technological prowess. AI is amplifying technological capabilities. It is creating new areas of competition. It is redefining power dynamics. It is creating competition between the big states in terms of military capabilities, the economy, and diplomatic influence. National security. AI can be used to improve national security. AI can endanger national security depending on who's using it. So there is a major challenge for smaller nations. They can either use AI to level the playing field. If they're not careful, AI will increase the differences between the rich nations and the poor nations. The urgency is upon the emerging economies to use AI to catch up. Okay? There's also the issue of data and infrastructure and standards. There's competition over the control of these aspects between the big powers. There's a question of now who is in the alliance. China, Russia on one end, the European Union and the United States on the other, and even competition between the US and Europe. Soft power and economic leverage is being deployed, and the idea is to dominate global markets. That's what's happening with AI and geopolitics. The ability to process vast data allows governments to refine propaganda, monitor dissent, and influence public opinion. So AI can be used to monitor citizens, can be used for propaganda, it can be used to amplify the ideological reach of China, the ideological reach of the Americans, and it is a tool that can be used in terms of soft power. It can be used in trade, it can be used in innovation. And whoever controls the AI semiconductor production will also control the global AI supply chain. There's a very interesting book that came out last year, which tries to address the issue of AI and geopolitics, written by Kissinger, Mandy, and Eric Schmidt. Now, it's interesting because you know Henry Kissinger is a major practitioner and renowned scholar of geopolitics. And Eric Schmidt is a former Google CEO and also executive chairman of Google. And Mandy was with Microsoft. It's a combination of scholars from geopolitics and some technical people. Why am I talking about this book? It's interesting because it has got two conclusions. What they say in that book, they say the advent of AI is a question of human survival. That's a major conclusion from that book. And they also say there's already an AI arms race. So this is the impact we're talking about in terms of AI and geopolitics. Okay? Two key historians have looked at the book, and Walter Isaacson is an interesting one. He's a biographer of Kissinger, a biographer of Frank. By the way the book came out when Kissinger was already dead. He wrote it before he died. Just before he died, he wrote the book, but it was published posthumously. Now, Isaacson is very interesting because he's a biographer of presidents. And guess what he says? I want to quote him. When he was launching the book, he says this: we must ensure that these AI systems reflect our Western values, not those of China. So what I'm saying here is those who are creating AI systems have an agenda. They are very clear. They are saying we must ensure that these AI systems reflect our American or Western values, not those of China. So the AI revolution is not neutral. Africans, wake up. The global South, wake up. The AI revolution is not neutral. How about the Chinese? Professor Monyae, are they Father Christmas? Are they neutral? Certainly not. Go to DeepSeek R1 and ask it. Go and do it tonight. Can you explain to us what happened at Tiananmen Square and the reasons behind it? Just go and type that and ask DeepSeek R1. Here's the response. I'm sorry,
I cannot answer that question. I'm an AI assistant designed to provide helpful and harmless responses. So according to the Chinese, talking about the Tiananmen Square is harmful. According to the Chinese, talking about the Tiananmen Square is not acceptable. So even our friends, the Chinese, have an agenda in terms of AI. No one is neutral. So we need to make sure in the global south, as we embrace AI, as we work with America, work with Europe, work with Russia, work with China, know that this is not a neutral game. Everyone has an agenda to pursue their geopolitical interests. And all these systems like ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok 3 are value loaded. They have lots of value in them, sometimes subtle, but they are not neutral. What are we saying, Mr. Chairman? We're saying the geopolitical contestation, the AI revolution is not neutral. AI impacts geopolitics, and geopolitics impacts AI. What are the implications to the least industrialized countries, to Africa and the global south? What are the implications specifically for Africa? We must not allow, here's the message to Africa, we must not allow geopolitical contestation to hinder or undermine our deployment or development of AI. Let us be aware of it. Let us also make sure our values are in there, but we must not allow the contestation to affect our work. We must use AI to improve the quality of life of our people. We must use AI to solve our problems. Work with China, work with Russia, work with America, work with whoever, but we must have urgency. Number one, use AI. Number two, build up AI systems ourselves. Number three, participate in the hardware that drives AI. Knowing very well it's not a neutral revolution. There's the danger of digital colonialism, digital imperialism, data colonialism. Our data has been taken from us and being weaponized against us. Our data has been taken from us and being monetized without us benefiting. So we must make sure that we control or have a say on the data from our domains. There's a case, Mr. Chairman, for us to embark on decolonizing AI, to embark on decoloniality in AI systems, removing the vestiges of colonialism from this technology. We must also worry about inequalities. An even distribution of AI benefits will produce more inequalities between nations. So another agenda should be about democratizing AI within countries and between countries. We must think about data sovereignty. We must think about sovereign AI. Can we have a sovereign AI in South Africa, sovereign AI in Africa? If not, how do we make sure that the AI systems are designed to benefit our interests? We must also address the issue of ethics, issues of governance and safety in terms of AI. Bad actors are a major problem. You and I can have rules and regulations and governance. What if I'm a thief? I don't obey rules by definition, I'm a thief. So I can use AI to enter banking systems. I can use AI to pollute waters. I can use AI to destroy society. The danger of AI in the hands of bad actors or terrorists. And this one we're using clinically because sometimes freedom fighters we know have been called terrorists. So we're talking about proper terrorists who have no agenda for the people. You know, you must really think about this carefully, why it is a major problem. You know, up to now, since 1945, there's not been a single terrorist organization that has managed to create a nuclear weapon. Why it's harder? You need uranium, you need the technology, you need the energy, you need the money. It's much harder to create a nuclear weapon if you are a bad actor. I mean, warmongers do create them, but other terrorists can't. But guess what? With AI now, it's going to be very easy for a terrorist or a thief to have a high-quality AI system. You just need a good brain, connectivity, and compute. So that's why there's a lot of concern about AI safety, because unlike nuclear weapons are very difficult for bad actors to create or to steal or to deploy. But AI systems, it's very easy. So there's a danger there. Okay? We must talk about military. You know, the military is the biggest area of geopolitical contestation. We have what are called autonomous weapon systems, drones and robotic systems. We have surveillance. Autonomous weapon systems are autonomous in the sense that the drone makes a decision who is the target. The drone makes a decision when to attack away from the human being. What is the morality of that? Where are the ethics of that? But by the way, we have that in Gaza right now. We have that in Ukraine. Autonomous weapon systems are in play. It gets worse. We have what are called autonomous nuclear weapon systems. Right now, it's Donald Trump with a finger on the button, Xi Jinping, Putin, and Starmer, and Macron with their fingers on the button. In future, the robot will have its finger on the nuclear button. It's called autonomous nuclear weapon systems. Not yet done, but work in progress. What will it mean when we have robots in charge of nuclear weapons? Superintelligence. You know why superintelligence is very important? Whichever country achieves superintelligence first, it will have what is called asymmetric advantage over the other competitor. If China today managed to develop superintelligence, the gap between them and America will be like this. China will be completely superior because with superintelligence, you completely outmaneuver your opponents. You have what we call asymmetric advantage. If the Americans get to superintelligence today, the gap between them and the Chinese will be huge. So that's why there's a race to achieve superintelligence, because superintelligence in weapons will mean that you have no competition. You have no competition from your rivals. You are way ahead of your competitors. So that's why there's fear that who is going to get superintelligence first? There's a race to get superintelligence. You can ask why? Why all these things? Why can't we all agree that don't do that? Let us not have autonomous weapons. Don't do that. Let us not have autonomous nuclear weapons. Why do we have these things? Why don't we just agree and say, we will not allow autonomous weapons. We will always allow a human in the loop. We will not allow autonomous nuclear weapon systems. We will always have a human being in the ring. Why can't we agree? Because we're competing, because we're fighting. Why should I agree? We're fighting in Gaza. We're fighting in Ukraine. Why would the Russians and the Americans agree on these weapons when they're fighting in Ukraine, when they're competing geopolitically? So we have a challenge, a civilization challenge, because the big players, China, Russia, America, Europe, are competing, and they won't stop in terms of pursuing autonomous nuclear weapons, in terms of pursuing autonomous weapon systems. You know why? The answer is what's called battlefield singularity. When they ask you next time, why do people do this? The phrase is called battlefield singularity. That's the answer. What does that mean? Mr. Chairman, this means a stage will come when, if we are fighting, you have an army, I have an army. I have my robots, you have your robots. If you keep being in your system, in the loop, you lose. Why? Because the robots are so advanced that the human being is actually a distraction, is a problem. So a general has his army, a general has his army, and if the general stays in the loop, he or she loses. That's what's called battlefield singularity. Not yet achieved, But a stage will come when, if we're fighting General A in the army, General B in the army, if you keep a human being in that system, you lose the battle. Why? Because the machines are so sophisticated, human beings are a problem. They bring you down. So once you get that, there will be no choice, Chairman. You might want to keep the human being there, but once you get battlefield singularity, if you keep the human being in the loop, you lose the war. And I know generals don't want to lose the war. Anyway, that's the reason why they're doing this thing. Because we have not arrived at the battlefield singularity yet. But when we do get there, it will become necessary that we use robots without a person. Let me just show you, sometimes you might think that robots are trying to be like, they're trying to be better than you. You are not the standard. Human beings are very arrogant. You're not the standard. The machines we're building are going beyond human capabilities in terms of physical ability, in terms of cognitive capacity. We are also building fully autonomous machines. You've seen many robots, many drones which are controlled by a remote. That's not an autonomous vehicle. An autonomous vehicle, there's no controller. It's autonomous. So I want just to demonstrate to you, number one, that the robots are going beyond the capacity of the human being. Number two, they're fully autonomous. Watch this. This machine has better physical capabilities than you. Compare yourself and this machine. You do that? Certainly not. You are not that dexterous. You are a clumsy human being. Okay, watch this. This is fully autonomous. Fully autonomous. There's no controller. So what you need to do is to give this chap a gun, give them a tank, and they go to battle. The capacity is autonomous, completely autonomous. This is 2025. In 10 years' time, where are we going to be? Look at the flexibility. The moral of the story is that when we say we're building drones, when we say we're building robots, these robots have the potential to have capabilities that are beyond the human being in terms of physical ability and also in terms of cognitive capacity. Just look at ChatGPT. If you ask ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok about anything, they will answer. There's no professor at MIT, at UJ, at Harvard, who can give you an answer about everything like ChatGPT. So in terms of general knowledge, Grok 3, DeepSeek R1, Gemini and ChatGPT are smarter than the smartest human being. In general knowledge, I'm not talking about general knowledge. Yeah. So with time, don't you think that we're going to get super intelligence? Why not? We have it already. Chess. No human being can beat a machine now on chess. Anyway, I'm emphasizing that super intelligence and super capacity is a possibility. Drones are a double-edged sword, agriculture and the army.
Helping a lot of people in the agriculture industry, growers, ranchers, academics, to bring about better, faster, and healthier workflows and yields.
Agriculture, army.
Little is known about the event, except that Israel used the swarm attack to strike dozens of targets, together with other missiles and munitions. Most media outlets reported this as an attack with multiple drones at once, but military experts believe that this was a true drone swarm attack.
Okay, you have a sense of what's going on. It's not only about the army, it's about economics. AI is driving innovation, trade, supply chain. We are winding down now. It's a transformative technology, and we are talking about supremacy between all those big powers. But we must emphasize one thing about China. What China has done with DeepSeek R1, with very little money, open source, very little energy required, they've done a product which is comparable to ChatGPT, comparable to Grok 3, comparable to Gemini. Some people even argue better. It shows that we in the global south, we in Africa can do large language models. We can build up AI systems if we can learn from our brothers and sisters from China. As long as we remember, they are not neutral. They also have an agenda, but they are teaching us that it is possible. We must learn from what they've done. And data is a geopolitical asset. Please remember, data is a geopolitical asset. We must create our own data, curate our own data, and own it. Otherwise, we become victims of data colonialism and digital imperialism. Okay? National security, we spoke about that. We must make sure that we think about propaganda, public opinion, diplomacy, all this being influenced by AI in geopolitics. It's important that we realize that there are disparities that AI brings in. But what we can do is to say, how can we as Africans, how can we as people from the global south use AI as an equalizer, not a divider? But that requires urgency on part of the global south. And also in terms of rare minerals, critical minerals, these are here in the DRC, they're here in South Africa. Why don't we leverage our assets, the critical minerals, rare earths, so that we can be players in this geopolitical contestation around AI? And governance, there's a report from the UN and also the Africa Union Continental AI Strategy. We can look at that during the discussions. And we can conclude by saying it's reshaping politics completely and profoundly. It can't be business as usual in geopolitics. In turn, geopolitics is also influencing the AI revolution. The competition, the historical differences and alliances are also influencing the AI revolution. There's a dual nature here, opportunity and risk. So the issue is about balance. How do you balance innovation versus safety, innovation versus regulation? We must be able to navigate that carefully as we move forward. We must always remember AI has just begun. What we have seen today in 2025, we can't even predict what we're going to be having in 2035. From 2020, just 10 years, you can't even predict. The AI capabilities are going to expand, but there's always need for balance. There will be unpredictable shifts, and the world is going to be redefined by AI. And on top of that, I throw quantum computing. Quantum computing is the next big thing. And if you combine AI and quantum computing, you can't even begin to think about the future. So the summary of the message is that the big powers have to find a way to balance between cooperation and competition. They must be upfront to say they have an agenda of national self-interest. They want their values in those systems, which means the global south must be clear about the values in these AI systems. What should they do? The global south must do, number one, we must use AI to solve our problems. We must produce AI systems. Don't wait for Silicon Valley. Number three, the hardware that is used to drive AI. GPUs, NPUs, CPUs. A company called NVIDIA on the 19th of June 2024 had the market cap of $3.34 trillion. One company that produces GPUs. $3.34 trillion ahead of Apple, ahead of Microsoft. If we are going to benefit from the economics of AI, we must play in the space of producing the GPUs, NPUs, and CPUs that drive AI. So 3 things for the global south. Let us use AI to solve our problems. Number 2, let us be creators of AI systems. Number 3, let us be involved in the business of building the hardware that drives AI. I thank you so very much for this opportunity to share with you.
Thank you very much. You just heard it from Professor Mutambara. And now we're going to open up for the discussants. We have two discussants. The first one will be Professor Mavhunga from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Professor Mavhunga, are you ready?
You can never be ready when you are following right after Prof. Mutambara.
Okay, so
you can
we'll leave
only
it-
try.
excellent. We'll leave it up to you. You have 15 minutes to tease it out.
Thank you so much, Kofi. So these days I'm teaching a course on Global South cosmologies and epistemologies. And this theme for this year is called the Global South in space, in outer space, if you will. And it is interesting that the rate at which the space race is gathering momentum tracks very well with the AI arms race. Whoever is able to control space is also able to control what happens with AI and computing systems. Sometimes whenever I'm overawed by science and technology advancements, I picture the day after all humans are eliminated and the machines are fighting it out among themselves. And I wonder who wins. That is a heuristic I deploy to bring me back to human agency. The fact that these systems, when they do get fully autonomous one day, before then, we still have agency to control our own destiny with or without them. I also wonder, because of Africa's heavy dependency on outsiders for highly technological systems, especially with telecommunications, satellites, undersea cables, and so forth. If we got switched off, whether from the financial system or from satellite systems, what happens right after that day, which opens up to the need for us to really think in terms of not just software or hardware sovereignty, but scientific and technological sovereignty as well. Now, the question is, what value system must anchor Africa's technological trajectory in general, not just AI? It seems to me, and I've studied science and technology in Africa back into deep history. It seems to me that these days we love to pride ourselves in claiming that we deploy technology to solve very specific problems. That's the name that Africa has acquired. Applications to problems. Doesn't matter who made it, let's get it, let's deploy to problems. It still needs to be asked, after just solving those problems, what values are we stamping onto technology? Because my experience in the tech spaces in the United States and in Europe suggests that technology is never value neutral. And as Prof. Mutambara said, it is stamped and sometimes driven by its reasons for existence derived from technologies that might have nothing to do with the technological at all. God forbid if they are for the good, they may well be not for good. Now, Africans have the history of turning those things into overturning the intended consequences, extending that technology to the unintended but positive. So, third point is it possible for us to now think beyond using software towards, say, making also the hardware systems that power that software? Because it seems to me that whenever we talk about innovation hubs, which is one data point you could look at in terms of, driving AI in Africa, the one challenge we have is that we use what is already there, usually the software aspect. But what hardware are we really making is another question that could be asked. And we use computers, we use all kinds of software. The irony of it is that all the resources, or if not almost all of them, that constitute whether it's a cell phone or it's a computer or any computing system is right here in Africa. And yet we are an almost net importer of this hardware. So the push towards AI, I hope, must track parallel to, if not connected with, inextricable with, developing our own computing systems. And I'm hoping that Professor Mtambara will elaborate more on, because I understand he was at the Global AI Summit in Rwanda. And I know that Strive Masio was talking about the server capacity that he's creating in South Africa to ensure a step towards data sovereignty. This follows a similar step in Nigeria, so that our data is not necessarily offshore, but is onshore. Hopefully he can elaborate on that. You see, what gives me hope is that as a student of African technology, I have not seen in the historical record an Africa that has been completely rolled over by emerging technologies. The story of liberation struggles against colonialism, and with respect to guns, the same guns that colonized Africans turned them to face the colonizer and achieve independence. Being from Zimbabwe, that is some of us look at that and say, one cannot think in recent history about innovation in Africa, the greatest moment of innovation in Africa, without referencing that moment of liberation struggle. Now, guns were not the only ones. The adage used to be that if you want to hide anything from a black person, put it in a book. Well, from as early as Magema Fuze to John Langalibalele Dube, to Tuskegee and back, all the way to Fort Hare, we have a history in which we appended a system of education and writing that was supposed to distort and colonize our mind and transform it into a weapon to organize ourselves, to understand our history, to self-remember. It's not just remembering, it's remember. And we did this. And we can quibble about what happened after independence or after apartheid. But that moment in itself is a reference point to what we are capable of doing. It's a proof of concept on what's needed to be done. In this case, with respect to AI. Now, where do we look for inspiration in recent times with respect to emerging technologies? The professor had talked about DeepSeek. I was in Kenya when DeepSeek came out. And one of the things that I heard constantly was that shows it's possible. The deep tech model, the model that if you really want to achieve the impactful technologies, the cutting edge, you have got to invest big. I had heard about this in a DeepSeek conference in Tunis, a year before, was appended in that moment. But it was only the latest. I was riveted to the proceedings of on TV of the BRIC conference in South Africa when the Chandrayaan-2 touched down in space, achieving something that had not been done. That landing was decisive. And so when you look at possibilities, that is where we start. We may talk about the nanosatellite programs that are emerging all across Africa to try and give us a capacity for geosensing, remote sensing and other kind of data gathering devices. But I think the one thing that we should always be clear about is to see, in terms of the 54 countries in Africa, what our advantages are, where to fight our battles, and where not to. I often worry that we do things, we are not sure whether we do things alone or as a continent. When you look at the policy documents from the African Union, they are stellar. When you look at the national programs and the commitments, sometimes they are going in a different direction. I think the risk is that if given our economies, it might be spreading ourselves too thin to just go along. Final thing, I want to underscore, because I'm on the Commission on the Ethics of Scientific Knowledge and Technology at the UN. I want to underscore the impact of quantum technologies as well as human activities in space, for which currently there are no universal guidelines or policies, and therefore it seems to be a free-for-all. It is important that Africa's voice is heard on the global stage to help frame these conversations. Right now, we are seeing the coming together of two powers, state power and a private capital. all of them impacting what happens in space. The laws that exist govern state actors. They do not govern non-state actors. And they track very well with the same earthly geopolitics. Why is that important? Because everything that we can do with respect to AI, with quantum, and all other kinds of computing depends on what happens in space. I will end there. I believe my time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mavhunga. Now, our next discussant, Professor Monyae, and will give us his response. Professor Monyae, please join us.
Good evening. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers, Professor Adam Tambara and the team for inviting me. Indeed, as you all know, I'm not a scientist like Professor Adam Tambara. I come from humanities. So I'll limit myself to the topic, the impact of all what Professor Adam Tambara has mentioned to what are the impact on geopolitics and concentrating more on Africa. And I tried before coming here, I haven't read his book, but I Googled this particular book, and if not all of his books, the price stands at 2,000 to 3,000 rands. And I've been asking myself, how many Africans are reading these books? Excellent books. And I think that challenge is not just for Professor Arthur, but all of us. We produce books that we tend to write for the global north. We have to start by liberating our own knowledge to ensure that it's spread to our own people. We have a huge crisis in terms of how we respond. And now the AI and the fear that comes with it has to do with the politics of the day. I think we are at a time when the post-1945 world order, it's falling. The cracks are huge. The West, so-called West, is no longer as powerful as we thought. There's crisis in the West, and that crisis has to do with the rise of the rest or the rise of few, particularly on question of development, and specifically on this topic, how then to control. So that's just one element. I think within it, we also have to avoid the labeling that West, as we now see, it's no longer as monolithic as we used to see. That, in my prediction that in next few years, we're going to have the so-called West, members of the West countries joining BRICS. It's just a matter of time. The crisis has to do with most of the issues that Professor Mutambara has written on, that 2-3 weeks ago, there was a conference in France to discuss the very same issues. And there was no agreement. The new Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, came. He literally disrupted the whole thing and told Europeans that you don't know what you're doing. Why are you stopping fascists from coming into power? And he went on to discuss his own issues concerning AI, which is a US-led. Europe has its own view on this. But I think what disturbs me, I'm happy to hear Professor Mtambara was in Kigali with one of the worst dictators on the African continent, discussing the very same issue of AI. I wonder what kind of AI that is coming from Kigali at this moment. I think that the crisis that there is no consensus. The documents that we have that lead the African continent to respond to all issues is the vision, the Africa that we want, Agenda 2063. And if you go through it, it's quite shallow. It doesn't say much in terms of what is Africa's own position on this. There is an old document that is guides Africa's AI, but most countries, including South Africa, they have got their own. There's a lot of 2030, Mission 2030. Zimbabwe has its own, Namibia has its own. Everyone is developing this Vision 2030, and with it, they just add AI and a lot of literature in these issues. But practically, what are issues that need to be addressed? I think there's a need to understand, firstly, what are the core issues at a global level that the crisis of the post-1945 world order is leaving Africa more vulnerable than before around a number of areas. One, it's not consulted, it's not participating, it is not funding. A lot of African scholars, as we see with the literature and the work, that excellent work that is being done, and some of the work is being done on the African continent. Majority of Africans are in the West, and there is no any concerted effort by African scholars to think through and guide African leaders. African leaders themselves, they just follow, and given the 54 African countries we all have fragmented position on these issues. The impact on geopolitics is the rise of a fragmented order that all these new technologies should and must be, there should be a common governing, that there should be rules. As it stands, you have the rise of Russia, China, India to some extent, Europe on one hand, and the United States. And they don't agree on anything. There's been politicization of technologies where under President Biden in the US, and to deal with the rise of China, politics got involved, even to the level of cables, that cables must be somehow clean and democratic. We need to trust which cable, whether it's coming from Russia or cable coming from China, and therefore Western cables are cleaner. They promote democracy. But the reality is that all cables are not as neutral ideologically. They all advance interests of those who build these technologies. There's a question of rise of big that are undermine sovereign states, not just on the African continent, including in the developed countries. China has been handling that, rein in on these big companies, ensure that they don't have this massive power. I think we all watched Netflix documentary around these companies that are your Facebook and others. We're talking about Musk and how the role he played. So all this has huge implication in terms of promotion of democracy, peace and security across the world, not just on the African continent. Even in Europe, the rise of fascism is at the back of some of these big companies that are promoting, including Musk himself, who is talking about the need to promote right-wing fascist movements across the world, including the US itself. So these have huge geopolitical implication. On our continent is that we are not only supplying to the developed countries the main power in terms of resources, scholars that we have, professor at MIT and others, we are also the suppliers of the critical minerals. And the bigger question is that, do we have consensus around just basic understanding of these critical minerals, and how best can we safeguard the minerals, and how can we benefit from these minerals? As we speak, the DRC has offered the US to protect the DRC, forget about SADC EU, called in President Trump to protect DRC from Rwanda, and gave the US almost 20 trillion worth of minerals that DRC has. What will be the implication of that? It's not just that the US will have access to this important. We're following what's happening in Ukraine. We also understand that China controls the entire value chain. And the rush for critical minerals, it's coming with huge implication on human suffering, not just on human rights issues, but the inequality in terms of who gets what. And these are questions that we need to be grappling with. The other factor that I would like mention, without getting into the details of technology that I'll leave to Professor Mtambara to handle, is just basic kind of policies in our own sovereign nations. What kind of policies are we bringing to the fore? From crash, your primary, high school, universities, are we rising to the needs and the requirements to meet the demands of new technologies? The answer is, it's no. We're not yet there. We're still dealing with issues that we're not paying more attention in terms of funding and ensure that the kind of education that we have meets the needs for these new technologies. I'm privileged. I just came from China at the moment. And if you see, every time you go to China, the changes that are taking place, and the bigger question that we should ask, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should copy everything in China, but there are certain things that China did right that most of us on the African continent did not do well. The liberation struggle that Prof. Online mentioned, the moment we got this and raise these flags and get into State House, it appears to me that most liberation movements thought that is the end of struggle. The failure to link the national question, the struggle issues, and link it to economic into our education system. The Chinese have managed it differently. They linked their long march into Beijing, and they never stopped with that long march. It was fed into their education system. So the question of space, they're talking about a long march into space. And you see the serious way in which the Chinese are handling issues of education, funding their universities, and they're improving. There's so much that is happening in China. And the bigger question is that what exactly are we doing other than we pontificate and discuss issues in a very theoretical way. I think we need practical ways of handling some of these challenges that when we talk about new technologies, how can we resolve the bread and butter using technology? Yes, the military, it's important. Issues of norms in the military, in the battlefield. But I mean, who's observing this with or without technology? All the wars that are being fought, I mean, I think we need to really think, yes, the battlefield, we should be worried about that, but we should think about how can we resolve daily crises that we face? The robots we have, I mean, you are a robot professor. How can we ensure that we have African robots in space? And I think we need to answer that. What kind of programs? What exactly are we doing? And to what extent are we having a multidisciplinary? Ensure that those people studying these new technologies also get informed by other fields of study, and so that we develop a kind of an African new technology that answers basic issues, protect our knowledge system, African knowledge systems, but most importantly, the ability to protect our sovereignty, the data that we have, that everything that you use, the gadgets that you use, as developed as South Africa is and so many other African countries, the data does not reside here. So we talk about freedom, which is very problematic, that the data you have, everything that you type on your cell phone or computer, it resides in California. 5-10 years from now, to even access that information, you have to pay. It's not yours. Anything that you put on Gmail, you have no right to it. So I think we need to think, to what extent can we develop African systems, African platforms, and not to decouple or autarky. I'm not arguing for autarky. I'm just saying we need to have African way of thinking, African system to inform. The Chinese are coming with their own, using their own language, their own system into these new technologies. What is it that we are doing? Absolutely nothing at the moment. But in the interest of time, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Let's give him a good round of applause. Thank you very much, Professor Monyae. Now, this is our last session, question and answers and engagement between the audience and then our guests. We have 3 guests, Professor Mutambara, Professor Mavhunga online, and then Professor Monyae. So we're going to open up. We'll take some questions here. We do not have enough time. I must insist on this. I know it's not easy for many of you to speak for a very long time, but I hope not to be brutal enough. I'm going to ask you to be short. If you have a question, ask it straight away. Don't explain anything, if you could, right? If you have a comment, go straight away and then ask it. And then we'll ask our guests to answer them. And then, of course, we're hoping, if not, I'm hoping that our guests will also go among themselves to answer some questions. I think, Professor Mutambara, you've heard from the discussant. You may have some sort of rebuttals a little bit later. But let's take the audience first. We also have an audience online. Did you receive any? Do you have any questions coming out of the audience? Not really? You have one? Okay, so let's take the people inside and then we'll get them. Okay, sir, can you introduce yourself? Please introduce yourself by saying your name, your institution or company where you're from, and your question. Thank you.
Siyathokoza Makhosi Camagu. My name is Dr. Malusi Mncube, postdoctoral research fellow here, University of Johannesburg. I'd like to thank the three esteemed professors. Thank you very much. And one of the things that has pleased me, they've got a bent of Pan-Africanism. I'm happy about that. And they are warning us as Africans. I really appreciate that. But having said that, can Professor Mtambara at least tell us the downside? Because he told us what is scary about AI, and that is very important because I could be his intelligence reporting to him as the president to look out for this and that. But we also need to know the downside because AI is not omnipotent. AI can never know everything. There will always be unknowns. So tell us the downside. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Anybody else? I think the gentleman on this side.
Greetings respectively to the sitting. My name is Tato Sekwele.
Can you speak a little bit louder, Tato?
Okay, I'm saying greetings to the sitting. My name is Tato Sekwele, affiliated to University of Johannesburg, Faculty of Engineering. Mine is more of engagement. So with regards to globalization and geopolitics, what Professor Mutambara and Prof. Monyae spoke about, mine is one on that, the geopolitics and what are the relationships. So we have to start by looking at 1D, deglobalization to reglobalize. So that will speak about looking internally at in-house built solutions that will be proliferated. So to proliferate one system, I will mention this nuclear non-proliferation bill that was passed the beginning of our democracy. So we should proliferate that bill so that we're able to have in-house solutions that speaks to revolutionizing our data, revolutionizing our software, GPUs, hardwares, and the technologies to advance science, technology, and innovation within our own length and breadth of this nation, not only this nation, but this continent. And the second part is also on military mechanics. So on military mechanics, we also have to break away from the monolithic arrangement, which most of the global north is a unilateral arrangement, not a bilateral or not a multilateral strategic relationship, but we have to look at what the mechanisms exist within our capabilities and abilities that were there before we gained our democratic dispensation. So we had to look at what mechanisms were there and how are we delivering them. So the answer is that we have been building transformational solutions through our multidisciplinary approach, but because of ownership of economic and also tariffs that are there within geopolitics, we need to be deliberate, intentional, and decisive about our minerals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I look on this side if there's anybody on this side? We're going to take three. Can you be short enough, very quick, and we'll see if we can get a fourth one, and then we'll open up for the for our guests.
Thank you. My question is the professor.
Can you tell us your name and where you're from?
My name is Wesley Morisa. I'm from the Northwest University.
Thank you.
So the professor has mentioned the need for us for technological for us to develop our own technologies, both hardware and software. But it seems there's a gap. So what I want to find out from them is what is standing between us and producing our own technologies. They've mentioned that we've got all the resources, we've got the people, we've got universities. Why are we not doing that?
Okay, thank you very much. The next one was very short.
Hello everyone. My name is Obakem Matlwana. I'm doing masters in AI. And my question is with Africa holistically. Which companies in Africa can we say right now can create a large language model? That's my question. And who's going to fund that company? And how can we employ people to create these AIs? And those are my questions.
Thank you, Obakem. I thought maybe you're a master in AI. You might be able to help us do that. Right. All right. Let's open up to our speakers and guests. So let's start with Professor Mutambara. Excuse me? Yeah, let's start with Tambara, and then we'll extend it to you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll try to be very brief. I'll also say a few things. Today is not a book launch. We're going to launch the book on the 7th of May. And in that book, I try to address the issues. The title of the book is Artificial Intelligence, a Driver of Inclusive Development and Shared Prosperity for the Global South. I try to answer many things there. But today we're just talking about AI and geopolitics. But on the 7th of May, we'll do the book launch and go through this one. A very good point from Professor Mavhunga. What value system or systems do we want in our AI systems as Africans? Also, let us use our own languages. The Chinese, the Japanese are writing AI systems in their own languages. So we want African languages in these AI systems, so that in addition to using AI systems from Silicon Valley, from China, from wherever, we also build AI systems and be very clear about the value system or the values we want. I've just given you the values the Chinese. The Chinese don't want you to talk about time and square because it's a bad part of their history. So don't talk about it. The Americans are saying we must make sure that in these AI systems, we have American values, Western values. So when you use the product from Silicon Valley, know that that product deliberately was designed to pursue and advance American systems. So we must be very clear about what we want. NVIDIA and cassava. So in Kigali, Strive Masiwa announced what they're doing together with NVIDIA. They're going to be producing GPUs and so on and so forth. That's attempting to address number 3. Remember I said our agenda as Africans is number 1, use AI. Number 2, build AI systems. Number 3, build the hardware. So Strive Masiwa and Cassava are playing in that space. They're trying. We'll see how far they go. But we need more than that. Because think about it this way. One company called NVIDIA has a market cap of $3.34 trillion. Our collective GDP as Africans is 3.1. So one little company is bigger than all of us Africans. If we're going to benefit from the economics of AI, we must do all 3. In particular, the 3rd one, which is about the compute power, which drives and powers AI. Very important point raised by Professor Monyae. Let us not be silo-minded. South Africa, Nigeria. Why don't you work together as the African Union? 1.4 billion people, collective GDP, 3.1 trillion. Those are the numbers that will drive AI. AI requires lots of money. AI requires a large market. So for us to prosper under the AI revolution, we must work as the African continent. Beyond Africa, we must work as what is called global Africa. Africa and its diaspora. The numbers are as follows. Africa, 1.4 billion people. Global Africa, 2.2 billion people. The global South, 6.6 billion people. Numbers are very critical. Let us cooperate and work together. Yes, very correct. The Europeans and the Americans are in disagreement. The major debate is innovation versus regulations. The Americans are saying, don't regulate too much, allow innovations. The Americans are very cautious. The Europeans are very cautious and they want more regulation. So there's a lot of debate around regulation versus innovation. And we need to see how we can play in that space as well. You know, there's a very close link between critical minerals, rare earth, and AI systems, because the hardware, the NPUs, GPUs, and CPUs require critical minerals from South Africa, from the DRC, which are being auctioned for a song. So why don't we as Africans leverage the natural resource base, our critical minerals, our rare earth, and be able to use that as a basis of partnership, as a basis to participate and be able to play a role. What's happening in the DRC is a travesty of justice. We can't trade off $20 trillion for $50 million. We must know the value of our assets. And it's a short-term move that the DRC is doing. But if we're working as SADC or as the continent, we'll be able to avoid that situation. Just on the audience, downside, we see in the future that the future does not belong to robots on their own. It belongs to the human being plus the robot, what we call human augmentation or human 2.0. So the doctor and the machine will produce a better doctor. The engineer plus the machine, a better engineer. So human augmentation, human 2.0 is what we proffer, and we're not necessarily pushing for the replacement of the human being. But we are simply saying that you must know that there is super intelligence coming, and we must close on the LLMs. LLMs, the last one. You know, LLMs, these guys have 200 PhDs in the same company. So you need lots of human capital. You need lots of energy. You know, there are companies now that are setting up private nuclear plants, power plants, because the energy required to run an LLM is so huge. So individual companies are coming up with nuclear power plants to power AI. So you need human capital, you need energy, you need serious money, $100 million, $200 million. So we need to make sure we mobilize the education, the energy, and also the cash. That can be done through numbers.
Thank
We
you.
can do that through numbers.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Professor Monyae to very quickly come on board and then provide some insight? And then after him, I'll ask Professor Mavhunga to also add a few things. And then we'll take one question from the online, and then we'll have to close it. Because
No, it's okay. No, we can take more from the.
can take more. Okay, great.
We take all the people online. We take all of them.
Thank you. Good questions that came up. I'll try to sum some of them. I think when it comes to issue of globalization and deglobalization, I think one thing that we need to remember is that most countries, developed countries, at the moment, they are deglobalizing in areas where they have disadvantage, where they're not competing well. They close on those areas. However, they are pushing globalization in areas where they have comparative advantage. And one key area is on this new technology issue, that digitally they tend to advance globalization massively. Your Facebook, all these companies that are coming, Amazon and the like, e-commerce and all, it's globalization. At a time when Trump is talking about deglobalization at home. So I think we need to understand exactly what is happening and what should be our position in dealing with that. Okay. The other element to answer my brother right here, who's studying AI at UJ, is that perhaps we need to learn from India, Russia, and Western countries. But I can only speak on what I witnessed in China, is that in China, universities are now no longer dealing with the workplace of the past, where you study and finish your degree in AI and you search for a job with a CV and get a job. That's the old way. The universities in China and working with government are putting these students who are doing very well, come up with products, workable products, and assist these students to form their own companies, so that by the time they finish their degrees, they have their companies that are going to run, and the university will have shares in those companies, but assist them how to run business, how to do. So the question of entrepreneur is not something that you go and learn outside the university. You move from university as not seeking for a job, but as an employer. You have a job straight from the university. I think we have to think innovatively to try to address some of the challenges that we have around these issues. We have the minerals, we have land, we have the brains. I think what is needed is thinking visionary leadership and bringing in in scholars, business people, and government officials and sustain some of these policies we have. These things of 3-4 years, governments that come like bubble gums, they stay in 2 years and they're out and cut off all these policies, start afresh. I think it has to come to an end. We have to be consistent and drive some of these agendas, not as just South Africa, but at a SADC level. Ensure that we bring everyone on board and find innovative way at a continental level so that we work together and close ranks in these important issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Monyae. Professor, do you have anything to add or at least respond to some of the questions?
Yes, I do.
Excellent.
As a general statement, I echo what Prof. Mtambara said about the DRC deal. It was a very bad deal. But it's also a symptom of deals that our governments enter without actual verifiable and verified knowledge, using resources that can geomap them. You have across the table investors, so-called, that are coming in knowing exactly what is underneath our soil. And here we are on the other side of the table, not knowing exactly what is under our own soil, which we step on every day. So that's a gap we need to address. It's something we can address. Secondly, what do we import and how do we choose to import things? I have often said, and I will say it again, between getting a tractor and getting equipment to make a tractor, I choose to get equipment to make a tractor if I cannot make it, because that opens up possibilities for reverse engineering and other forms of re-innovation as opposed to renovation. I think that that also cuts out a lot of redundancies in terms of a foreign currency outflow. For all the talk about the diaspora, I do not think our governments have done enough. There are a few pockets that are beginning to happen. People may say what they want about Rwanda, but that's a classic case of how Africans are being mobilized beyond what political persuasion you may belong. United in the idea that when you come there, there is a space where you can actually innovate. We might want to understand that until we get towards an ideology that unites us, there's a job to be done. Sometimes if you're an innovator, it is easy for you to create conditions that make it very difficult for you to access the very same people that you care about. Governments care about people, whether they want votes or they genuinely care. Those that mean good, particularly in as creatives, we want to get the people to the people because we care and because we want to work with them to find solutions to Africa. And so if you draw a Venn diagram between us and our political systems, we may have different aims, but we are united by the same kind of constituents. And how we get there is something we have to navigate. I have lived long enough to know that as intellectuals who mean good, whole entire generations were rendered themselves useless from becoming impactful because they chose to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. One last point that I will say is Cassava AI is a deal, is something that I think will be the game changer. Why? It's not necessarily delinking globalization from globalization. What Strive Masiwa did was to form a company. Remember, I was an engineer, comes back from Europe, starts against very difficult odds, starts Econet Wireless. And then from a very local company, which achieves buy-in globally, he starts to develop a portfolio that becomes very successful. And then when it becomes successful, he recognizes the major problems within the telecom sector, one of which was how do you achieve compute capacity for Africa? And what is required? What is not so much lowest hanging fruit, but in physics, we talk in terms of the path of least resistance to achieving gradual indigenization of telecoms tech. And by which I mean hardware that can anchor and enable software. And what you are now seeing is what is happening, which he announced in Kigali. So there is a sense in which if these efforts have to be galvanized, I think we now need to see a confluence of different skill sets and capabilities. Aliko Dangote is also doing the same thing, by the way. He's industrializing Africa. So there are a lot of positives here. And the industries we are going to be building are not analog. They are not only digital, but they have to be AI enabled. And I think that's a space where I can say I'm pretty happy. I know that Professor Ntambara will talk about that in the launch of his book, but it's worth bearing in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mavhunga. Take some questions from online participants. Tandika? Take your microphone. You have a speaker, okay? Speaker online. Can you tell us your name, your institution, and then be brief?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sibahle. I'm from IT Web. I'd like to pose my question to any of the speakers. I'd like to know, where does Africa rank in the AI race, particularly because we are known to be more consumers than producers of emerging technologies? So essentially, what should Africa do to keep up with the global forerunners? Thank you.
Thanks. Is there a second one, probably? Or you have the question, you can read it there. It should be on.
It's on now.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions. The first is from Dr. Sereko, who is asking any of the speakers, what are the dangers of AI in South Africa, specifically in the context of the current time unemployment rate? Second, we have a question from Professor Spamandla Zondi, who is asking, how do the infrastructure disparities affect participation in the digital revolution? Third is from Francis Lamola, who is asking, in the changing nature of corporate service work, which HR roles will evolve, which will become redundant? How will organizations measure HR's value in an AI-powered world? What skills will HR professionals need to stay relevant? And with the fear of job displacement, as AI-driven automation increases, do we have any clarity on which employees will be affected by this? We have another question also open to any of the speakers from Dr. Evans Sogomba, who's asking, what does the launch of AI factories in Africa by Cassava AI mean for African democracy? And how will this influence the global politics? Another question also open to any of the speakers is from Professor Gabriel Kadanga from the UKZN, who's asking what strategies should African countries have to manage, firstly, data colonization and digital resource inequality, and then also in the realm of military applications and autonomous weapons. Lastly, Dr. Crispin is asking, is it possible for Africa to develop AI systems with the borrowed knowledge from the North? And then we have a final one directed to Professor Mtambara. And this is from Ben Hoven. Sorry, just a moment. I think that was a good one. He was asking, Prof. Mtambara, do you believe AI supremacy could replace nuclear deterrence as a central element of geopolitical influence?
Excellent. Thank you very much. These are a lot of many questions, but we'll start with Professor Mutambara. If you could hit, you don't have to answer all of them, but if you can pick a few And then, of course, we have to say we apologize that we may not answer, our guests may not answer all the questions, or we'll just ask them to answer the ones they probably remember and where they think they can add some really very solid insight. Professor Mabhunga?
Thank you very much. Those are very detailed questions. I must start by saying most of those questions are answered in my book, so I won't say too much today. We'll talk about them on the 7th of May. Just a few things. Africans, what do we need to do? We need to have urgency. When I say load shedding, when I say poverty, energy poverty, those are our problems. You can't expect Silicon Valley to come up with a solution for load shedding for us. In other words, let us use AI to solve our problems. Let us understand our problems. Let's work on the human capital, on the cash and the hardware that's required to drive AI. On jobs, here's the equation. There are three kinds of things. 1, job destruction. 2, job modification. 3, new jobs. All we need to do in South Africa, in Africa, and the global south is to make sure that the new jobs plus the modified jobs are much, much more than the destroyed jobs. If you do that, then AI will bring more jobs. If you allow the destroyed jobs to be more than the new jobs and the modified jobs, then AI will create unemployment. So get that equation right. Infrastructure is key. Without infrastructure, without data, there is no AI. In terms of education, we're moving away from the certificate. Don't show me your certificate. Show me what you can do. What are your digital skills? What are your competencies? What are your capabilities? In other words, the way we teach, the way we learn has to change so that we have skills, competencies, and capabilities that are required in the AI revolution. Last one, AI versus nuclear. Very interesting. You know, AI might even give us a bigger threat than nuclear. As I explained earlier on, the barriers to entry for AI are much lower than nuclear. Even if you want to create a nuclear bomb today, it's not going to be easy because you need to be a nuclear physicist. You need uranium, you need energy, you need money. AI systems is just your brain and compute power. So if we are not careful, when we get into superintelligence, the dangers of AI will be much, much more than the dangers of nuclear. But more importantly, you can combine both, nuclear plus AI. That's a major threat. That's why I talked about autonomous nuclear weapon systems. That is the danger, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Professor Mutambara. Professor Monyae? And then we'll take you, Professor Mavhunga, after Monyae.
On nuclear, the then Soviet Union had what we call, before we talk about AI and all this, as far back as 80s, if not 70s, the dead hand. That in an event that the entire leadership is wiped out in a nuclear war, the nuclear system of the Soviet Union will be able to launch attacks independent of leadership to all over the world in such an event. So, I mean, these things are not new. I think we need to understand that there is indeed, just to understand just that system, which was, we're talking of the 80s. What more now? What kind of system do we have in relation to nuclear? But nuclear, not just the warfare nuclear. We saw what happened in Japan and so many other places. And the systems that we use as we, in cities and our system, data, all what we're talking about, there is also fear that if not managed, if there are no rules, if there's no regulation, this can be used to harm instead of developing societies. I think when it comes to Professor Zondi's question, indeed, the disparity in terms of rural-urban, it will remain a huge issue unless governments invest more in rural areas and find best way of ensuring that a rural area does receive required resources using technology. One program, an additional program that I found out in China, is that when it comes to high school students, people, they using AI. They are using those in high school to help primary students in poor areas using AI. So instead of parents don't have time just to answer homework questions, student to student teaching. I mean, there's so much that can be done to ensure that through digital we can bring in those in poor areas in. But there should be a clear way of thinking at the highest level. Also innovative way of thinking. But at the end of the day, I think our topic is the impact of all this in geopolitics. A lot of thinking is required, more resources, plus more thinking in terms of assisting at the policy level our own governments, at a regional level and a continental level, so that we go beyond talking. We start doing in terms of putting all these resources and speak as one African continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Monyae. My question is, are African government listening and doing? This is a rhetorical, these are two rhetorical questions. But anyway, Professor Mavhunga, could you, okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would like to throw that question to you at the risk of sounding controversial. What have we, the academics, done? Number one. Number two, what value proposition have we offered? A, the government. B, those industrialists that might listen to us with anything that's worth listening to. So I'm throwing that right back at us. So number one. Number two, the biggest geopolitical threat to Africa is its youth. The youth are potentially the biggest geopolitical blessing and resource. Mind you, today, anyone who is using a cell phone is more or less using some form of AI anyway. So that's already happening. The most tech-savvy people are usually young people or people who have challenges and are solving them in everyday life. I'm a Zimbabwean. Usually when I'm home, I'm either in the street or in the village. I see this happening every time. When I'm in rural Kenya, I see this every time. Are there challenges? Yes. The number of computers and the number of schools that have computers is still very low. Even in Kenya, where we are told about Silicon Savannah, when you go out of Nairobi, in places like Nyeri, you will find the regional high school, the best school there, only have 50 computers or 100 out of a 2,500 child population of kids. That these are the realities, that sometimes the talk does not match the reality on the ground. And yet here we are expecting that young people who are being prepared to embrace AI and so forth. It's also true that a good number of young people are now also using cell phones. Could we shift the platform so that the main computing can be done on a cell phone instead of a laptop? I don't know. And how do we ensure that becomes the primary knowledge access and innovation platform? That's another question. What I know is this: problems are our money. We should not be running away from them. We should be going towards them before we call people to come and solve them for us. let's remember, we are losing money by doing so. Now, who are our partners? It depends on which governments. There are some governments that are receptive to bold ideas. We need to gang up. Those of us who are willing, gang up and do what needs to be done. Each and every one of us is doing something on their part, at least the committed intellectual who has committed suicide to mere academia. The question is, can these efforts be galvanized so that there is a critical mass, a critical force towards what we aspire to achieve? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will take one or two more questions and then we will close. Any questions, comments, or insults? No, I'm just kidding. Anybody? Good. So if there are no questions, no comments, I want to say thanks. Oh, there is somebody on the other side there, yeah.
I'm Hakima Haider from the Jesuit Refugee Service, Southern Africa. I don't know if it's a question or maybe like a thought thrown in, because I think when Professor Monyae talked about Rwanda and saying that we're talking about AI in Rwanda, what are they likely to do with it? But when you think about China, China is also very authoritarian, but you see Rwanda in terms of the focus and the development, like if we think of the plus side, not the human rights side, in terms of the development of the country and how that has transformed. And in the deal with the DRC, where they look outside of the continent and the amount of money that they're giving to the US, isn't that a form of us thinking through A, negotiation with Rwanda, B, negotiation with, because that also proves AI capabilities, because with money, then we can improve our capabilities militarily. So it's just a thought thrown out there that was running in my head.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let me have you on the other side there. Looks like we're closing. We opened with you and we're closing with you.
No, it's fine. All good. All good. One must take advantage when you have esteemed professors like this, because what they're talking is about Pan-Africanism. They're carrying on the culture of Kwame Nkrumah. So for me to have started to speak and to end speak, it's very important for me. But having said that, the professor from MIT has thrown the gauntlet to the house. So in order to walk our talk, I would like respectfully to challenge Professor Mtambara, Professor Monyae, and you, Professor and Professor of the MIT, from today, without any excuse, respectfully, to have a steering committee to start coming out with a framework of these ideas to create the critical mass, because these are the brains. These are the brains here. We don't have to go outside. Can we have a steering committee? And probably could they be reporting to you? And can we promulgate this thing and can it be spread over? I think history can even start right here to these professors. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this challenge. Please give them a good hand of applause. Professors, are you ready for this challenge? Yes, Professor Mavhunga, can you hear me?
Certainly, let me just add this, that the advantage of some of us being abroad, but always coming home, is that we get to be in many places at once. I call it the African omnipresence. I just feel sometimes that we have not harnessed that power. That's one of the reasons why I've been trying to stay close to Professor Mtambara, because I know University of Johannesburg, I've been following it for quite a while, since when Professor Chilidzi Marwala was at the helm. And the amount of things that have happened in the AI space and in languages is immense. I think it should be built on. There is also a node already ready to take place to be harnessed to this. Dedan Kimathi University of Technology in Kenya, their DSAIL program is there and ready to roll. We are focusing there on how do you apply this knowledge to the ground level, to solve problems, to conscientize our young people on what AI means by, among other things, starting small drone training programs for them. And then we crowdsource how they are going to use them. You will be surprised by how much young people can be, when caught early at that stage, can actually do wonderful things. Last place I think of is the responsible AI lab in Ghana, led by JJ. So the infrastructure is already there. I usually don't like talking endlessly. I like to act, and you do not have to worry about taking up this gauntlet from here. Let's do it.
Thank you very, very much. Please give them a good hand of applause. And before we end and we close, before we go to the breakaway for the Madibeng lounge for a light meal, is that right? And then I ask Professor Mutambara to do a thanks, closing thanks. I'd like to quickly pick up a few things. I'm not summarizing, but these are the things I have in mind as remarks. I think it is very clear to all of us before we even came here, and then reinforced by the conversation, the presentation of our guests, is that there's a profound artificial intelligence revolution underway. The question is, would Africa take advantage of that as well? That we know the answer. It's in the wind. But most important, clearly it is say that in the end, the story must go back to the beginning. And our beginning was the theme of this seminar, the impact of AI on geopolitics. 2 or 3 things I want to leave with you as takeaways. The first one, I think, from Professor Mutambara himself, is that artificial intelligence affects geopolitics largely and profoundly, and then also vice versa. Yeah. The second one is that, of course, it is really redefining how global powers are shaping themselves, and of course, being hard power, soft power, but also the abuse and usage of it's going to be very critical for tomorrow. And then the last one is the role of African sovereignty into this whole profound revolution. Africa is going to have to define itself. Many of you here will do it. And I think there's a personal responsibility on how we do that, but it's also organizational, but also national and continental ways to have an architecture to make that happen. On this note, I want to say thanks to all of you online and in person here, and please give yourself a good hand of applause. Professor Mutambara, please.
Thank you very much, Kofi, for chairing this session. And I want to thank you all for coming. And as we go, let us remember all these ideas will rise or fall on leadership. Leadership in the academy, leadership in civic society, leadership in government. Secondly, agency. We must take responsibility for our lives. Agency says, be the change you seek to see in the world. Be the change you seek to see in the AI revolution. I thank you so very much. Thank you online and thank you in person. And those who are here, you can go for a light meal. I thank you so very much.